Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us at the 106th International Labour Conference at the Palace of Nations in Geneva. Today is World Day Against Child Labour, a day that sheds light on the plight of billions of children, millions of children around the world. This year, the theme is child labour in situations of conflict and disaster. Joining me to discuss this issue is Beate Andreas, the ILO chief of the Fundamental Principles and Rights at Work branch, Ruba Jaradat, who is the ILO regional director for Arab states, and Abbas Asi, who is an advocate against child labor, a university student, and also has personal experience himself as a former child laborer. Beate, I'm going to start with you, and I'm going to bombard you with a few questions at the beginning. I hope that's okay, but I would like just to set the scene a bit. Is every child who works a child laborer?
Of course not. Child labor really means exploitation of children for economic benefit. It often involves the worst forms, hazardous child labor, forms of work that put at risk their lives, but also their morals, their development. It involves children who are simply too young to be working. Countries need to set a minimum working age so that children can follow school. So it's very much linked to compulsory school age. But then we also have children of legal working age, usually older than 14, 15, 16, depending on national legislation. And yes, these children can work. And they should be in apprenticeship systems. They should be in decent conditions, of course, as long as it does not interfere with their schooling.
Now, you mentioned hazardous forms of work, and could you just explain a bit more about what that would comprise?
It implies work that is, as I said, dangerous. For instance, children exposed to pesticides on plantations, children working in mines, children carrying heavy loads that they are simply too young to be carrying, children who are trafficked for sexual or labor exploitation, who are in slavery-like conditions. Those are really the worst forms of exploitations we see, unfortunately. It can also involve work that is, extremely long hours. Again, that puts at risk their well-being and development.
So there is more of a priority to withdraw the children who are engaged in this kind of child labor, I suppose, from the other child laborers. Is that correct?
Well, let's be very clear. We want children to be in school, to be able to finish school, and then transition into decent work. This is the ideal scenario, used to go into an apprenticeship system and then find decent work. Everything else should be eliminated because it's illegal. It's against the ILO's conventions. Hazardous child labor or slavery-like conditions, of course, is a matter of priority because the suffering is the greatest. But all child labor, all the 168 boys and girls in child labor should not be there. They should be in school.
This year, the theme of World Day Against Child Labor is child labor in conditions or in situations of conflict and disaster. What is the effect of conflict and disaster on child labor? What is the impact?
Well, we estimate that about 250 million children are living in conflict-affected areas, either because of political conflict, war, but also natural disasters. Many of them are at a high risk of being exploited. And we've heard actually the story today of many young children who live in conflict areas, and we see how terrible it is in terms of them not being to go to school, needing to support their families because livelihoods have disappeared. So we don't have an estimate yet how many children are in child labor in conflict-affected areas, but we are working on this.
Ruba Jaradat, you are working in a region, in the Arab states region, which has been hit by multiple conflicts in recent years. How have you seen the situation of child labor evolve in recent years? I mean, what has changed?
Well, I mean, like you said, we're all watching the news and we see all the very difficult political and economic circumstances in the regions, the crisis, the refugee crisis, the conflicts, which resulted in a very high unemployment rate. This has caused an increase in child labor. In the Arab region, it's almost 9.2 million child laborers, and 57% of child laborers in our region, they work in hazardous conditions, which is an alarming percentage. Many of them, or most of them, they work in agriculture, and the circumstances are extremely difficult. Now, employers, unfortunately, they employ children because they pay low rates. They don't have to pay for social or health insurance, and particularly if we look at the region in Jordan and Lebanon, because they are the biggest host of Syrian refugees. The child labor in Jordan, for example, has doubled since 2007. And in Lebanon, we don't even attempt to try to eliminate child labor, but what we're trying to do is to eliminate the worst forms of child labor in Lebanon. And it's getting, unfortunately, worse and worse with the increased influx of refugees.
I'd like to take this moment to remind viewers that you can send us your questions by posting the questions in the comment box on the Facebook page. Abbas, you are someone who has been personally affected by conflict. You were a child during the 2016 war in Lebanon. Tell us what happened.
After the war of 2006, my father got very sick after the loss of his brother and father and mother. So I had to help him.
How old were you?
I was 10.
You were 10.
10 years old. But then my father got totally sick, so he couldn't go out the house. So it was my time to take the responsibility. So I started working with another man in the same profession, and as an electrician. So that's my story.
And how long were you working? How long were you working with him? How long were you working when you were a child?
I worked with my father for 1 year and with him for 4 years.
And tell us then what happened. How did you? I mean, for many children, I think they feel that it's a situation that they cannot get out of. What did you do to get out of this situation?
First of all, you should know how to say no. You should know how to say no for everyone. When I was in my own town, I got to know an NGO, Beyond Association. They gave me a chance to say no for working. So now I'm not working anymore. I'm as an electrician. I'm teaching students at my own house. Yeah. So.
You are also a student yourself, aren't you? What are you studying at university?
I'm studying management information system and law. Yeah.
We're going to get back to this story in a moment. The problem of child labor can seem insurmountable at times because of the huge numbers. How can the ILO, or what does the ILO do to tackle this issue?
Well, first of all, the good news is that the numbers are decreasing. Not as fast as we would like to, but globally speaking, child labor is going down. Unfortunately, we see an increase in some regions, and it is very often related to conflict or climate change, forced migration, and so on. So that's the sad part of the story. And of course, the solutions in those contexts are difficult because it's overall it's a fragile situation. So where we see progress is clearly in countries that have set up strong education and social protection systems. That's where the numbers go down. So the policy measures is clearly to governments and policymakers. The decrease of child labor doesn't happen automatically. Economic growth is not enough. You need to have targeted policy measures to enable kids to go to school and to enable their parents to find decent work and to have a social safety net. Now, coming back to the issue of conflict, which we've discussed today, I think here we need, first of all, a much better collaboration between humanitarian agencies and labor market agencies like the ILO to find labor market-based responses to conflict, which are often at the root of the problem. I mean, groups that are socially excluded and have been disenfranchised from society for a long time. So bringing in labor market institutions, strengthening these institutions, bringing in, employers, organizations, businesses, raising their awareness about child labor, and this is not the right thing to do, is a very important first step to take.
There was as you were answering your question, we just got a question, and I think you've answered it, from Marilina in Brazil, and she was asking the same, what concrete actions can be taken to reduce child labor. There's actually another question that's come in from Robert, and he's asking, how do we know that labor standards have an impact? Where have we seen that happen?
That's a very, very good question, because we are often told that our conventions against child labor are having no impact. They're just sort of declaratory, but they don't trigger down. This is actually not true. We see now, when you look at the statistics, countries that have ratified the ILO's convention, in particular the recent one on the worst forms of child labor, in those countries, targeted policy measures have been taken and child labor is going down. So there is clearly a link between your international commitment under an international instrument of the ILO in this case and active policy measures. But it's not enough, of course. Ratification of an ILO instrument is not enough. You need to implement this in practice, and I think that's the key challenge, right? How do you put these policies in place?
Ruba, in light of the developments that we've just discussed, the conflicts in the region, what is the ILO and the Arab states doing to combat child labor? Are there any specific examples that you could give us?
Yeah, actually we provide support at different levels. Mainly we work on national child labor databases, surveys, evidence-based research to provide to identify the problems, and then we work on the policy level. For the reasons that Beatrice have mentioned, it's very important to make sure that there are policy frameworks in the countries that are affected by child labor. We work with our partners, the different institutions, government, employers, NGOs, and workers' institutions, building their capacity and raising awareness. That's also very important. And of course, direct services to child laborers. And that's through withdrawing them from the labor market and rehabilitating them and putting them back to school. And it also depends on the age of the child. Like older children, working with them on vocational skills, and working with UNICEF also. They've been a good partner in putting children back to school. But the most important interventions that made a difference in our region is providing livelihood and jobs for the parents, for the family, so they don't have to send their children to school. Abbas brings a very good example where we worked with the center where Abbas went, and also with different programs. One is providing nurseries for refugees or the women in tented settlements. they cannot work because they have to look after their children. So the nursery, so what they do is they send their children, older children, to work so they can stay home and look after their smaller children. Now they can put their children in nursery, and older children, they go to school, and the women go work in the agriculture sector, which is the most hazardous for work for children. And this is also a problem that we notice because most of the Syrian refugees, households are headed by women. And it's the household that is headed by female usually are more likely to have a child working than any other any other family. We also work on establishing centers in different areas, not only in the areas where there are workshops where the children are employed. So we rehabilitate, we build these centers and provide them with the necessary recreational programs, educational programs, and food and nutrition.
Abbas, I have a question for you in a minute, but I do want to take another question from the viewers. Thank you very much for sending them. Beate, there's a question from Arl. Is there anything that people can do as consumers to resist child labor? How do you know whether something you buy is made by children or not?
Well, absolutely, consumers have a role to play. We all buy goods that are potentially produced by child labor. In our iPhones, there are the minerals that are used for the iPhones in our garments. However, it's very difficult to trace. We don't have the data and information to say exactly that this T-shirt or iPhone was produced by child labor. So I guess as a consumer, your role is really to, first of all, know that this problem exists and be active, maybe engage yourself in a NGO or somewhere else and support those on the ground. That would be really useful. And to be aware that everything you consume has a price, and a decent salary paid to adults is not the same as the salary that usually kids, girls or boys receive when they are in child labor. So if something is extremely cheap, you should be suspicious regardless.
That's a good easy way of knowing, isn't it? Yeah. We have some more questions coming in, but Abbas, I want to ask you, today you spoke on the front lawn of the Palace of Nations. You spoke very, very well. We really enjoyed it. Tell me, please, how, I still don't know how you made your way from working as an electrician at the age of 14, 15, and how you find yourself here now with us today.
Like I said before, I'm a volunteer at an NGO. That NGO was once in my own town. I was participating in its activities as a beneficial. So then I found that the doors of volunteering are open. So I told them the story, my story, and I was like I said, a beneficial. So they gave me the chance, and all I want is, I believe in equality. I want chance for every child, all the children, the working children. And my life is now different from 2 years ago, or 3, 4, 5, 4 years ago. Yeah.
And you're studying at university.
Yeah.
You are studying. Tell me what you're studying.
Management information system and law.
Now, does your choice of law, does that have anything to do with your advocacy work against child labor?
For sure. For sure. I want to defend the rights when I hadn't no one to defend my rights. So I want to defend, even though if it's one working child. Yeah.
Who are you? What kind of children are you working with at the moment, and what do you do to help them?
Youth children, especially. 10, 14, 10, 15. I'm trying to participating in raising awareness events. And now I'm trying to talk with their parents for the role the parents play, like my mother did. Yeah, if my mother didn't didn't support me, I couldn't be here today. So yeah, I think parents have the main role.
And the children that you're working with, are they mainly Lebanese, or are they refugees?
No, from all the nationalities,
From all
wherever
the
it is. Yeah.
We will come back to you,
Okay.
Abbas. I have a question here from Lawrence. How to ensure that during time of conflict or crisis due to natural disaster, NGOs and international actors comply within international labor standards. If they comply, will this help keep children out of child labor while ensuring family can work in a safe and productive manner that allows them to provide for their families? Who would like to take this question?
Well, I can say a few words about it. I think if I get it right, I mean, of course, as international organizations, civil society organizations, we should act according to the higher standards. So it goes without saying that we should also have procurement policies and other policies, ethical guidelines in place that help prevent child labor. But if you look at the numbers, of course, the key question is, how do you get businesses to comply? How do you raise the awareness of businesses that this is, including small family businesses, because sometimes it's not the big companies, it's actually small family business, it's informal business. How do you get them to understand that child labor is just not the right thing? It puts at risk the future of these children.
And I think even in difficult situation of crisis, it is still the responsibility of the government, regardless of the situation. The governments who ratified all these conventions, especially in the Arab world, almost, the ratification of the main conventions are almost 100%. And it's still the responsibility to make sure that the proper standards are implemented.
We have a comment here, not a question, and the comment is from Nana, and she says, "We are proud of you, Abbas."
Thank you.
And there are several other comments actually that are coming in that are similar. They're voicing their encouragement for you.
Thank you.
So you're getting you're becoming very popular. So let me actually ask you. You said your life is very different now to what it was. There are many children that are still out there that are working in child labor. What would your message to a child who's now working in the streets, who's now in the fields, whether they're in Lebanon or whether they're anywhere else in the world, what is your message to them?
Like Mahatma Gandhi said once, if we are to live in a peaceful world, we should start with our children. But the message is, if you don't find the inside peace, you won't do anything. You will be down. So, plus peace, there is education. Whatever happened, education comes first. If you are to defend your future, you'll defend it with your education.
Very strong message.
Yeah.
Even more comments coming in for you, saying we're proud of you.
Thank you.
If you were to just give a main message from the ILO on child labor, there are so many messages, but what would your main message be on child labor?
The main message for the day is really that we need to reinforce our commitment. It's not business as usual. We have very ambitious goals in the Sustainable Development Agenda, and we need to come together to join forces, no matter where you come from which country, whether you are in government, whether you are from the workers' organizations, business, NGOs, young people, old people. We have to join forces.
Ruba, you mentioned the responsibility of the governments, but also in the Arab States region, as in every region, the ILO works with the governments and the workers and employers. What is your message to them?
Yeah, like I said, it is the responsibility of the government, but of course of our social partners as well. We will need the help of our social partners, the workers and the employers associations, institutions, to help us provide, spread awareness and provide services and to get through to these children who are working in difficult conditions.
Abbas, what are you going to do right after you leave Geneva? What is your next task?
You know, it's the vacation. It's my summer. It's summer. No, I'm trying to spend all my free time in Bekaa.
Bekaa is the agricultural area of Lebanon.
Yeah. So, because lots of refugees are there, 60 or 70% of working children live there. So I think that's my destination when I finish it. Yeah.
All right. Good luck. And
thank you.
We're coming up to the end of our time. So I would like to say thank you very much for sending in the questions, for sending in the comments of encouragement, and for joining us at the 106th International Labor Conference from Geneva. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to Beate Andreas. Thank you to Ruba Jaradat. And thank you very much, Abbas Hazi. Good afternoon.
Thank you.